Everyone told me to play Tormented Souls. This is exactly what I've been looking for too. Over the past couple of years, I've been thrilled to see some new quality survival horror games. Elisa was equal parts nostalgic and fun, and Signalis delivered classic Resident Evil style inventory management and a wide variety of puzzles with a fascinating story to unravel. While I was praising those games, you all told me to play Tormented Souls. And yeah, it's been on my radar for a while, like a lot of games, I just hadn't gotten to it yet. Well, I finally loaded it up and it immediately fascinated me. And if you know my videos on survival horror games, you'll know why. The camera. So many people say that fixed camera angles are dated and no one wants them anymore. They were only used to get around technical limitations. Well, the fact is that fixed camera works great when the gameplay is built around it, and I've always believed it could be modernized without throwing the whole thing out. Tormented Souls mixes classic static angles with rotating cameras and advancing cameras that follow the player. It's a wonderful mix that shows this style of presentation is not some barbaric method loved by the nostalgia blinded. It's an art form, which can be done well or done poorly. And if you're tired of every game having the same camera sitting behind your character's shoulder, you need to play a game like this. This game finally delivered that feeling that's been missing in my life, where you walk forward and the camera changes, and you stop moving just to appreciate the photography. I'd stop what I was doing and say, wow, that's a nice angle, I love it. They've done a wonderful job of switching back and forth between a modern feeling moving camera and easy to navigate static angles in a way that feels entirely natural, mixing in the occasional stylistic Dutch angle or showing off something in the foreground. This is my favorite part of Tormented Souls. On this alone, I can recommend it. The main location of Tormented Souls is a wonderfully designed old hospital with serious Resident Evil Spencer Mansion vibes. It's spooky and it's beautiful. You eventually find yourself on the basement level and further underground, but that's really it. I think that was the only real major letdown for me. I love the location, but after 8 hours, I want to see something else. If they ever do a sequel, I hope there's more variety. One thing the game really exceeds at is the constant feeling of dread whenever you enter new environments. Sometimes in these games you just want to run all over the place, but I found myself slowing down, walking, being cautious, and that's a great feeling. There are some legitimately scary moments in the game, and it's very light on jump scares, so the occasional time when they do go for a jump scare, it lands hard. Enemies will be alerted to your presence by your footsteps if you run near them, so there's good reason to move slow in unexplored areas, especially if you're in the dark and you can't shoot. Just look at me getting the shit scared out of me because I got too confident and started running. I think the story is pretty good, but it unfortunately falls into the trap of so many horror games where they create this complex backstory that gets told through pages and pages of notes. I'm honestly pretty tired of this kind of storytelling, because I really do want to know what's going on, and to do that, I have to stop what I'm doing every other room to read 4 pages of a diary entry. It's wild to me that the giants of the 90s survival horror genre were able to tell their stories, whether simple or complex, with limited amounts of interruptions for note reading. The character interactions in Tormented Souls are also disappointing. Just a static camera as characters stand there exchanging lines, not even walking around or physically expressing themselves, with some not good acting. The main character, Caroline, doesn't sound right at all, and I think subtitles only may have made for a better experience. As a survival horror game, Tormented Souls ticks many of the boxes you'd hope for except for inventory management. You can carry everything you find, and the amount of supplies on you will vary based on your exploration, your engagement in combat, and how often you take damage. I think the resource aspect of the game is okay, but it's sad to see the absence of difficulty settings. Since the survival horror genre is so well established at this point, with many experienced fans, I think you need to offer more challenging experiences in combat, resources, and puzzles. Hell, Silent Hill has had both combat and puzzle difficulty selection since 2001. The gimmick to the game's exploration is that the darkness kills you after a few seconds. You have to keep your lighter out to illuminate the space around you, and you'll find candles to keep rooms lit. Do that when you can, because you can't shoot while the lighter is out. You also can't move while shooting. Some of the most intense moments are when you're in a room that has to be lit by your lighter so you can only run from enemies. There's a moderate amount of combat in the game, maybe less than you'd expect, and there's no way to target enemies' body parts like a Resident Evil game. In Resident Evil, you're pretty limited from the camera and your lack of movement, but you can still have interesting combat moments, shooting out a zombie's legs and then turning around to blow another's head off, picking between fire rounds or acid rounds on different enemies. There's cool stuff going on there. Here it's just shoot straight and back up. I guess it works. You have a dodge back move that's crucial for avoiding devastating damage, and since there's no weapon switch button, we're playing old school rules. Open the inventory and take out the weapon you need, and that can help save ammo by switching to the crowbar to finish someone off. While the enemy designs are definitely horrific, they aren't exactly interesting in their behaviors. Boss fights are rare and honestly pretty bad, and there's an unkillable ghost that appears from time to time that you can just despawn by exiting the room and re-entering. Really disappointing. A Silent Hill 4 ghost, this is not. Sometimes the crowbar gets enemies into this loop of being able to hit them over and over before they can get up, but it doesn't happen all the time, so I'm guessing it's a bug. It's pretty funny when it happens though. On the topic of puzzles, that's Tormented Souls' bread and butter. Every survival horror title leans into something. It may be action or atmosphere and storytelling. Tormented Souls is about puzzles. There are many puzzles throughout the hospital, and the hospital itself is one big puzzle. You've got lots of locked doors, needing puzzle items, keys, or other solutions. Magical mirrors take you into Silent Hill-like nightmare versions of already visited rooms, with metal grate floors and rusted walls. Old VHS tapes create video images that can be entered, taking you back into the past, creating time-based puzzle solutions to affect something in the present. And some parts of the game have you using items you've had for hours but couldn't find any use for, or backtracking to puzzles you saw hours ago. The time travel aspect in particular is one of the coolest parts of this experience. I love the parts where you gotta remember to go back to something from the beginning of the game, turning off something you activated, or finally opening a door that was locked. It's an exciting moment when things all start to really come together and the place feels interconnected. And very intelligently, they put something in these spaces to remind you of something you saw a long time ago. But at the same time, it's this aspect of the game that can lead to things feeling a bit extreme, especially if you're taking breaks of several days between play sessions. You'll find something that finally solves a puzzle or opens a door, and you just may not make the connection to something you saw a few days ago. Part of the issue is that the entire game takes place in one big building, so it all kind of blurs together. But another is that your character doesn't mark important points on the map, like Silent Hill, or like the recent Signalis. It's a great quality of life feature that cuts down on aimless wandering around. It just isn't a lot of fun when the game comes to a screeching halt because you look at a 3-story map of 40 rooms and think, did I miss something? Do I need to go back and check every single room? And to a lesser degree, okay, I have this thing, and I remember I need to use it on that other thing, but I just don't remember where it was. Tormented Souls does mark certain things on the map, like save points, and a few locked doors, but I'd like to see more. And if you think that would spoil the experience, I would of course support an option to preserve the reduced amount of map notes. And you know what else? I want the map to open on the fucking floor you're on. Why on earth does the map screen not immediately open where you are? You gotta click the floor you're on first? Why? When you're learning the game, you get lost or turned around, and here you are flicking through maps to find yourself before you can study it. What a weird-ass design decision. I like that many puzzle items need to be examined closely in the inventory to understand how they'll be used. Keys that have to be messed with, or a switch activated to be able to modify something. And I would be a big fan of the integration of story notes with puzzles if there weren't so many notes, the vast majority of which not needed for puzzles at all. The individual puzzles themselves are no joke. This is a game for people who like puzzles. If you're not in the mood to stop and think about a puzzle solution for half an hour or more, stay away. And some of the puzzles are based on real-world knowledge, and they'll leave you screwed and blindly guessing if you don't know certain things. Some of the combination key doors are quite hard to figure out. If you can't figure out what the picture hint is trying to say, you're going to be stuck. And I see a lot of people looking up answers online. Now, at least we do have the option to look up puzzle solutions, and these puzzles can get so tough that I can't blame anyone for doing it. Hell, I did it a few times, and I'll tell you why. Because I enjoy venting my frustrations here, and one of these situations was just funny. Spoilers ahead for 2 big puzzles in Tormented Souls. Skip to this time code if you want to avoid them. I feel terrible and embarrassed for looking up the solution to the clock puzzle because it's the exact kind of puzzle I advocated for when I criticized the clock puzzle in Nightmare of Decay. There you see the hands of a clock on a pool table, and that's fine, but the character actually spells it out to you that they look like clock hands, ruining any thought process. The standard for this kind of puzzle is in Resident Evil 1, where you have a knife and sword going into someone's chest and head, indicating where the hands of the clock need to be pointing. Classic puzzle with room to be something more complex if you take it further. And that's exactly what Tormented Souls does. I love this puzzle. 3 hands on the clock corresponding to 3 different paintings. Each shows you a weapon that points you towards the right time. And then there's a date that has to be inputted, which is gotten from a 4th painting showing the birth of Chewie Christ, and that's Christmas Day. Solid puzzle, very classic survival horror. But again, you'll notice that this is also based on real-world knowledge. So you have to know that the birth of Christ is December 25th, and while that is very common knowledge since everyone knows Christmas whether they celebrate it or not, there is nothing that points you to this exact date if you don't know it. That's not a criticism, it's just an example of a puzzle requiring out-of-game knowledge. I honestly overlooked the hints to the solution because I got obsessed with the idea that the answer was in the journals. I remembered a journal entry saying something about a certain hour that something important happened, and I was sure that was the hour that needed to be inputted on the clock, because journals contain puzzle solutions sometimes. So I went reading through page after page, all the notes I'd collected for like 7 hours, trying to find the solution, until I gave up. My vision had become so narrowly focused on this one method, and I had become so tired because it was 5 o'clock in the morning on top of this, so I just said, fuck it, I'll look it up. And God, did I feel stupid when I saw the answer. I wish I had just come back to it the next day with a fresh pair of eyes. I deprived myself of a great puzzle. The other one I struggled with was the door puzzle with the alien, pharaoh, and bee. I really don't get the logic of this one. If we're going by the picture hint on the door, people live on the Earth. That's a circle. But the solution for the aliens is a star, because aliens come from space. The stars. Though they don't literally live on stars the way humans literally live on the Earth. So the logic is already wonky. Suppose we say that the picture hint is saying that humans come from Earth, and that's a circle, and aliens come from the stars. Okay, that's a little better. But pharaohs are from Egypt and lived in palaces, not pyramids. They do not live in pyramids, nor did they come from pyramids. They were mummified and buried in pyramids, but we're supposed to associate Egypt with pyramids and connect that to a triangle. And the last image is a bee, and bees live in nests, in beehives, which are made up of honeycombs, and those are wax structures taking hexagonal shapes. So our last shape is hexagon. And yeah, the logic is a little confused. Beehives aren't hexagons, you think of them more as round structures. So, I don't know. I like the puzzle, I like what they're trying to do, I respect the attempt, and I'm sure there's people that put it together quickly. But I feel bad for anyone playing this game that doesn't know what a honeycomb is, or that pyramids are in Egypt. I mean, not everyone is educated. There's always Google if you need help though. And this puzzle, I completely ruined it for myself. The first thing that happened was that I missed the notebook in the room where you find this puzzle hint, so I had no idea it was related to the cash register combination. I was left assuming it was connected to the 1 line equals 1 hint on this door. We spent forever trying to find the logic between these 2 hints that were completely unrelated. Okay, that's my fault, but it left me so exhausted and frustrated that when we finally did get it, it just pissed me off. I mean, you're supposed to see one of these numbers as a symbol, and if you don't see it that way, you're screwed. And even if you do, you still may not get it. Probably the only puzzle I'm straight up not a fan of. I like the rest of the puzzles a lot, even the occasional puzzle where I had to look it up eventually. I thought they were creative, challenging, and fun. Like Signalis, there's not just a lot of puzzles, but there's a wide variety of them. But guess what's not here? A slide puzzle. because, everyone say it with me now, slide puzzles do not belong in survival horror games. Thank you again. I think the TV puzzle was probably my favorite, and I felt really good putting that together. I loved having to align the textures on the back of a circular key to place it correctly in the opening. Having to think of the alignment flipped was a really clever idea. The skeleton puzzle was fantastic. I love riddle-based switch puzzles. Very Silent Hill. So I've pretty much covered what I wanted to talk about. In the end, I really like Tormented Souls. I wouldn't put it as high up in the survival horror tier list as Signalis, due to some disappointment with the level variety, the combat, some questionable puzzle design here and there, that voice acting, but it was a real delight to play for the most part. The exploration was great, a lot of the puzzles were creative and fun. It was consistently tense and mysterious. The graphics are just gorgeous, and it ran incredibly smooth for me. I think the only flaw in the visuals is the blood. It just appears under enemies, and that's really immersion breaking for a game that feels so real. The music was great, some of it sounds like classic Resident Evil. I mean, overall it's just an excellent game. An early contender for my favorite game of 2023 once we get to the end of the year list. I would love nothing more than a sequel to Tormented Souls. Thanks for watching, thanks for the recommendation. If you'd like to see more of the Everyone Told Me to Play series, click on the playlist in the pinned comment and enjoy.